The Dell XPS line is finally back with the XPS 14-inch and the XPS 16-inch. And I've always seen the XPS lineup as a Windows MacBook Pro, you could say, with a stunning design, premium materials, and also a gorgeous display. So having said that, how does the 2026 Dell XPS stack up against the MacBook Pro? Well, first off, what does XPS even mean? Well, it stands for Extreme Performance System, and the naming scheme was first introduced back in 1993, 33 years ago. Wow. I'm getting old. That's why it felt a bit odd to me that last year Dell suddenly dropped the Dell XPS branding and replaced it with Dell Premium. So now that XPS is back, what's new? Well, first off, Dell is ditching that capacitive touch bar that was introduced at CES 2022 with the XPS 13 Plus model. And this was very similar to what Apple did with their 2021 MacBook Pro redesign that they're still using today, where they ditched a touch bar after 5 years in favor of just a standard function row. I personally think that this is a good move. A tactile keyboard is what we all want, and even though I didn't mind the touch bar in the pre-2021 MacBook Pros, I do much prefer having physical function keys. So what else is new with its redesign? Well, first off, the new Dell XPS is thinner and it just looks way more modern, perhaps also thanks to the fact that there's no more Dell logo on the back, but rather we now have the new XPS logo. It's also much sturdier than the previous generations, whilst also being a bit lighter. And the new XPS features a CNC machined aluminum unibody that looks so minimal. I especially love the design of the keyboard that just continues on from the body. It just feels and looks so modern and so futuristic. Opening the XPS is also a completely different experience from a MacBook Pro, as once you remove the bottom screws, the actual top deck and the entire keyboard lift up to reveal the internals. Now, in terms of the size and the weight, the 14-inch model comes in at 1.36 kilograms and 14.6 millimeters thick, while the 16-inch version keeps the same thickness but weighs more at 1.65 kilograms. Both are noticeably thinner and lighter than the MacBook Pros, which measure 15.5 millimeters and 1.6 kilograms for the 14-inch, and 16.8 millimeters and 2.15 kilograms for the 16-inch. The trackpad also has visible borders now, as in the previous model there was no clear way of telling where the capacitive surface of the touch bar would end. Compared to the MacBook Pro's trackpad, the size is actually very similar, but the XPS relies on piezo haptics. These trackpads are still very responsive and they feel really good to use, but just not quite as refined as Apple's Taptic engine inside their Force Touch trackpad. We also have two new colors for the 2026 XPS, and those are Graphite Gray, which is actually very similar to the Space Gray on the MacBook Pros, which Apple has now discontinued, and then we also get Shimmer, which is a color that's quite similar to Starlight on the MacBook Air. I think both of these will look fantastic with our Resonant Radiance pack from our Apple wallpapers, available in 8K using the link below. Now let's talk about performance. So these new Dell XPSs, they feature Intel's brand new architecture built on their newest 18A manufacturing process. And these chips are called Intel Core Ultra Series 3. They offer up to 50% CPU and GPU performance uplift at the same power consumption than their Series 2 predecessor. We've actually seen some early Geekbench 6 scores for the Core Ultra X7 358H, the processor powering the new XPS 14 and 16 laptops, and the results are not very impressive. I mean, the single core is about on par with the M2 chip from 2022, and the multi-core is a bit better than the standard M4 chip at 15,800. But that's still very far off the M4 Pro and the M4 Max chips inside the MacBook Pros. And don't forget that the M5 Pro and the M5 Max are also coming soon, and then the M6s are set to be coming later in the year with the brand new OLED MacBooks, which are also set to be much thinner. So, yeah, Intel has a lot of catching up to do. Now, back to the design, I also love the super thin bezels, and also the fact that we have no notch on the Dell XPSs. I like the MacBook Pros. What's also funny is that despite not having a notch, they actually support Face Unlock via Windows Hello, while the MacBook Pros have a notch, but they still don't offer any Face ID. And yes, the new XPSs can be configured with a Tandem OLED touchscreen display, something that Apple introduced with the M4 iPad Pro. However, what's really odd is that this Tandem OLED actually tops out at just 400 nits of brightness, which is really weird because usually you stack OLED panels together to boost the brightness, but 400 nits is what we basically had on, other Windows laptops with OLED screens. By comparison, the iPad Pro's Tandem OLED reaches 1600 nits of peak brightness, and that's also sustained, by the way, and that matches the mini LED display on the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros. So Yeah, I was hoping for more here. I'm not really sure what's up with that panel. Also, you need to pay $150. Otherwise, you get a non-touchscreen LCD panel that actually goes brighter. 500 nits, still, quite dim. So yeah, on the display side, at least based on these numbers, I am quite disappointed. Not even to mention that the new MacBook Pros, when they come out later in the year, they will be thinner. They will have that 1600 nit OLED panel most likely, and they will also be way more powerful. And guess what? They're also expected to come with a touchscreen. I'm actually curious to see how Apple would handle their touchscreen, because Dell used to have 2-in-1 laptops that would physically rotate their screen 180 degrees, which turned them into thicker tablets basically. The newer 2025 and 2026 XPS models no longer rotate, but I do like the fact that it did keep the touchscreen, so we'll have to see exactly which approach Apple takes. Anyway, to me it seems like the only reason why Dell is using the Tandem OLED panel is maybe to improve the battery life, because they're running both panels at 200 nits of brightness, so maybe that's more efficient than running one panel at 400. I don't know, but yeah, it's just weird that the brightness level is so low. And speaking of efficiency, both models come with the same 70 watt-hour battery, which is a bit strange. What's even stranger is that Dell actually claims the exact same battery life of 27 hours on both models. What's even crazier is that Dell quoted 40 hours of local video playback under ideal conditions, which is pretty mad. And these batteries are also silicon carbon. These are the first silicon carbon batteries on a laptop that I've seen. Compared to last year's XPS lineup, or sorry, Dell Premium lineup, the gains are especially noticeable on the 14-inch model, which jumps from 20 hours to 27, while the 16-inch keeps the same 27 hours of battery life. Both of these are 3 hours better than what Apple rates for the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros of up to 24 hours. Of course, we'll have to wait and see how these numbers hold up in real-world usage, so do subscribe for some hands-on coverage as soon as we have them in the studio. I mean, so far I would say the MacBook Pros are a better buy. You get better performance, you also get a better display, and you also get more connectivity, strangely enough, because the new Dell XPSs, they keep 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports and a headphone jack, but the SD card from last year is actually gone. Whereas on the MacBook Pro, you get an HDMI 2.1 port, an SD card reader, you also get MagSafe, and you get 3 Thunderbolt 5 ports on the M4 Pro and M4 Max versions, and the headphone jack also supports high impedance headphones. So what about the sound quality? Where there are no visible speaker grills on the top deck, so it looks quite minimal. But then on the MacBook Pros, you do get the speaker grills, and we all know the MacBook Pros just sound incredible, especially the 16-inch models. So we'll have to wait and see exactly how they sound like in the studio. The previous Dell XPSs sounded pretty good, but I do still expect the MacBooks to be superior here. Which brings me to the pricing. They are very expensive. The 14-inch starts from $2,050 and the 16-inch from $2,200. But if you upgrade to that Tandem OLED display, you have to add $150 more. So you'll be paying $2,200 and $2,350, which would make the 14-inch MacBook Pro more affordable, while the 16-inch version is still more expensive than the Dell XPS 16. Still, charging over $2,000 for a base model with a standard 500-nit LCD feels really hard to justify, as that's kind of a display that you would expect on a much cheaper laptop like a MacBook Air. Both the MacBook and the XPSs, they start with 512GB of storage, but the XPS includes 32GB of RAM as opposed to 24 on the MacBook Pros, which I guess does help its value somewhat. But look, I think the main reason why you would even consider getting an XPS is if you want a Windows laptop that has an amazing design. I think that's its key selling feature. However, if you're just comparing them side by side, I do still believe the MacBook is superior with a better display, and not even to mention more ports and significantly better performance. But let me know down below if you want to see an actual side-by-side comparison once we get it in the studio. And don't forget to check out our app wallpapers for some stunning designs. I'm Daniel, this is Zoneoftech, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Zoneoftech, signing out. Cheers.